Hi, my name is Kelly Fauner, and I'm an assistive technology consultant, and I'm a member of the Quiet leadership team. And I'm here to talk to you about the Quiet implementation indicators. When we look at assistive technology implementation, we're talking about the idea of all the ways that we implement assistive technology apps, devices, low-tech items, all of the things that we refer to as assistive technology, as well as the services that we provide around implementation. These are things that are included in children's IEPs, the related services, supplementary aids and services and accommodations and modifications, all the things that we use to deliver assistive technology into a student's plan. It also involves all the people, the planning, how they organize assistive technology services, how the services of assistive technology help to maintain equipment. And we're going to talk about these areas further. For me, my background is as a special education teacher, as a paraprofessional, as an implementation person in assistive technology, providing assessment services in my schools, in my area, in my county, in my state, and so on and so forth. But I also have implementation experience in people's homes where I've provided services, both in person and virtually. I also, as a family member of people with disabilities, have looked at implementation from that side of how do we implement things in our homes and in our community, in the places that we live and places that we work. In each of the areas of quiet indicators, we look at the different indicators that spell out what's going on in that area of us, and in this area of assistive technology for implementation of it, there are 7 different indicators. So looking to the guidance of the people that worked on these over the years, we look at assistive technology implementation proceeds along to a collaboratively developed plan. So it's not just one person that's putting this plan together. It's all the people, the student themselves, family members, all the people that have something to do with it. And we'll touch on that and some of the things that help you put those plans together and help in the guidance of it. We look at assistive technology as being integrated into the curriculum, into the daily activities, not just a one-time moment. We don't do assistive technology. We look at how do we have people that support that student across all the environments, and that's a shared responsibility. It's not just one person's responsibility to put AT in place. It's not just the teacher's responsibility or the SLP's responsibilities, but administrators have responsibilities, family members have responsibilities, the student themselves has responsibilities, and you can look to different forms and supports that are there for that area. And we're going to be going into that a little bit more here during our time together. We looked at, in the area of AT implementation, people to support students through a variety of strategies, including their AT and things that are built into their assistive technology, so that they can be the most effective that they can be in all the different circumstances that they're in. Additional indicators include things like learning opportunities for the student, family, and staff. Yes, there is a whole area in the quality indicators for assistive technology on professional development, but we want to make sure that that's included in the assistive technology plan. Also here in the assistive technology planning is making sure that assessment data and ongoing data is collected so that changes in plans are evidence-based. These shows you the interrelationship between the indicators, things like professional development, evaluation of effectiveness. Those things are not isolated indicators in themselves. They do interrelate, especially here as we touch on implementation and the pieces of it. And of course, assistive technology, apps, devices, low-tech items need to have ongoing maintenance, updating, servicing, making sure that they're in ongoing use for the student in their circumstances. Also, each of the indicators, just to make sure that you're clear, has intent statements that go along with it. So for the second indicator here in implementation of assistive technology, where we look at AT as integrated into the curriculum and daily activities across environments, and it's not just a one-time occurrence that we get our AT out and use it and then we put it away. But that intent shows you that AT is used when and where it's needed to facilitate the students' access to and mastery of the curriculum. That we're not just learning to use our AT, and that's the only reason that we have those kinds of tools, but we're using it to access the curriculum, to access our community, to access the things that we do. And that assistive technology facilitates our active participation in our educational activities, in the assessments that we take, our extracurricular activities, and the typical routines of the day. So look for each of those intent statements to be more clarifying of the indicators themselves. Talk a little bit more about some big ideas here in implementation and what implementation means to a lot of people. One is that it's not a separate event. When people look at assessment of assistive technology for children and youth, they think about assessment maybe as an occurrence or as a period of time of making a decision, but it really is linked with implementation. You need to know what you want to do with that assistive technology in an implementation situation while you're doing the assessment. And then while you're implementing it, you're constantly reevaluating what's going on, what might need to be reassessed. As a student's situation changes, you might need to be looking to adding features to different tools and or services as you move through it. So they really are things that work together, assessment and implementation. It's not just one thing and then another, but you need to know what you're going to do with the assistive technology as you're assessing. And again, as you're implementing, you're evaluating what's going on so that you can reassess if change needs to be made. Using assistive technology is related to the curriculum, your work, your play. As I mentioned as I was reading the indicator statements, it isn't just a one-time event. We don't just get out our assistive technology tool to learn the tool. We don't just go to computer class or get out our iPads and play with an assistive technology tool. That assistive technology tool, whether it's a word predictor or a communication system, isn't something that I just learn to do, but I use that as I'm participating in my English language arts class, as I'm writing my paper, as I'm preparing to give my presentation. I'm using assistive technology to function in those classes. Implementation is a shared responsibility. The plans have to be developed with all the people that are involved with supporting that assistive technology. If you're a teacher, as I am, and as I was with students in my classroom that had assistive technology, I needed to lend my ideas to the plans. It couldn't just be people like the speech language pathologists and the occupational therapists and the vision itinerants that gave the ideas and wrote the plans down and said about this is what was going to happen with the kids that were in my classroom. Or as a resource teacher, I wasn't going to be the only teacher planning what was going to happen in that third or fourth grade classroom that my kids were in. I needed to be working collaboratively with their general ed teacher, because that teacher knew the outcomes for those kids, or the desired outcomes for those kids, with his or her curriculum. And then the assistive technology is a part of that piece of it. So those things have to be worked with all the people. I don't want to be guessing what some other thing needs to happen. I don't want to guess what the occupational therapist needs to do to help work with somebody to get into a good position, or the physical therapist to get into a good position to work on something that's writing. I can tell them what I need to have them write so that we can make sure that it's practical and functional and is exactly what they need to accomplish. But I'm not the one that's going to be working on all of the aspects of it and trying to figure that out by myself. And so you would look to advice to all of those situations. I need to know how that child's positioned when they're doing their homework. And so we work collaboratively with families, trying to work out what are the best ways to put those kinds of plans together. It also is best if these plans are written down. We might think that we can remember all of the details. We might say, oh, well, you do that and somebody else does this. But what happens when that somebody else is gone? What happens when that somebody else takes vacation, or takes maternity leave, or changes schools? When that staff member is gone, especially if that staff member was a person that knew a lot about the assistive technology's functioning, we need to get up and running very quickly. Instead, we need to have multiple people knowing what's going on and backup supports. And you'll find that there are resources available where you can have planning guides to put together roles and responsibility matrices together. And as these kinds of changes happen, whether it's changes in staff, or it's changes in the curriculum, changes in the student, changes in things that are happening in their school, sometimes assistive technology needs to be adjusted, but it can't just be adjusted because something new came on the market. It needs to be adjusted based upon what's going on in the district, and what's going on for that child, and what's going on in their school system. So you need to be tracking that with data so that you have measurable decisions that you're making. And then, of course, a lot of this is based upon training, so that you can have training to support your staff, training to support your student and family, and then have ways of tracking the assistive technology system, all the components and pieces, so that as kids move from class to class and school to school, building to building, that everything goes along with them. Some ideas about planning for equipment. Here's a list that goes along with that indicator number 7. You can read through this, but that idea of managing and maintaining your equipment, who's going to provide the device, who's going to provide any consumables. You know, if you have a printer, how are you going to get the paper? How are you going to get ink? That goes throughout an entire school year. Resources become very scarce in third and fourth quarters sometimes, so you have to watch for that. Which environments, plan throughout the day. There might be different parts that different components of assistive technology get used. How's the device going to be made available in each of those environments, especially for kids who might have different kinds of seating systems. There might be different mounting and positioning systems. And a mounting system is not a human that's sitting beside you holding your system up. Somebody needs to be independent and independently mobile with their system. Other things about, where are things going to be located, where are they going to use it, what about adaptations and modifications, and then, of course, thinking about repairs. So this becomes a good list. Another thing that we have for you as you think about some of the next steps here, is complete that self-assessment matrix. You saw a couple of the matrices. There are 7 of those, one that goes along with every indicator. Take a look at roles and duties. And it's not about one person assigning them. In the research from Dr. Gary Cumley from University of Wisconsin Stevens Point, Gary looked at that we should be creating those roles lists, and then everybody should be self-assigning. And as many times you need to pass that around and get that done, and that there should be somebody that's responsible for each of the roles, and there should be a backup person, so that as you have that kind of a roles and responsibility matrix, it's best to have a fully thought out plan. And as you look at those kinds of planning tools, make sure you have timelines, even if things are ongoing, but making sure that there are timelines and times to review that list. And that kind of a timeline and that kind of a roles and responsibility matrix can be handed over to an administrator rather than having staff trying to check up on one another. Have that in the hands of an administrator that can do that type of, that could be their roles and responsibility on the matrix as well. And make sure that you're planning for following up and following along. You'll find in the resources that go along with this section an AT implementation planner that takes you through many of these questions that I've just been through. Include creating roles and responsibility matrices, looking at some of these equipment planning pieces too. Lastly, in this section, the resources that are included with this module are the self-evaluation matrices, all of the indicators with their intent statements, and that implementation planner that you just saw a really quick shot of. Some other resources with their links are some other implementation forms. You know, every type of assistive technology project has their variations of implementation forms, so you might find one that's a good fit for you. So the National Assistive Technology Research Initiative project has one. The Georgia Project for Assistive Technology has one. You'll find at the Wisconsin Assistive Technology Initiative site, there are forms in each of the different assistive technology areas, as well as their assessment package and transition packages. In Joy Zabala's SET framework for student environment tasks and tools, you'll find a nice planning matrix that includes looking at feature matching as a part of assessment, but then also planning for implementation, and lots of variations of those tools that people have done over the years. A couple of websites that have great training modules and implementation discussion boards are things like Practical AAC from Carol Zangari and her team. That's an ongoing practical resource for implementing augmentative and alternative communication supports for students that struggle with communication. OCALI, the Ohio Project, and their ATIM, their assistive technology modules in all the different areas, also have wonderful training supports. And the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistant Network is also one that will provide you with support in different areas, and you'll find some well thought through supports in the area of assistive technology. With that, we're going to close out this implementation section with the reminders about the Quiet website. The Quiet website is where you can go to download all of the indicator areas, the matrices, and other supports that people who have participated in Quiet over these many years. This is also where you go to join the Quiet list, where we have over 5,000 participants that are asking and answering questions. It's not just something that the Quiet leadership team maintains, but people are always talking to each other. The full Quiet book, where all of these things are brought together in a published format, along with stories that go into each of the indicator areas, and some other supports that were put together especially for the book. And then if you ever need to have a question answered from the leadership team, you see it quietleadership@email.com is how you get to us. So thank you and happy implementation.